Hello, Paul Scheele.
Hey, Pete, good to see you.
Yeah, same here. And welcome everybody to a session with Paul on photo reading about breaking the upper limits. And Paul Scheele, we have a lot of questions that have already come in.
Yay.
Should we just dive right into them? Or do you have anything that you
Absolutely.
want to say to start with?
Well, just a brief comment about breaking upper limits, because while that's the theme today, I want to also give some ideas of what an upper limit is and how you might be able to go about breaking it. So with every question that we have, and I haven't heard any of them yet, understand that we program our mind with our beliefs, our judgments about our past experiences. When we think about what's possible for us, we generally look to our past to see what it is we have been able to do up until now. And when we are standing at the threshold of what's possible but never experienced by us, at that moment, that's the crucial moment that we either impose a limit or we free ourselves to explore what's possible. And that's what we're really here to do, is to explore what's possible.
Yeah, sweet. So, Paul, the first question is, I happen to have one phenomenon going on with photo reading. I've learned the basics of it with Genius Code. And since then, I've often have images and scenes coming up during my image streaming that don't necessarily answer my actual question, but days later or even weeks later, I read a scene or a description in a fiction book that is astoundingly close to what I've seen in my image streaming session. Have you heard about something like that before? And is there a way to get to it quicker instead of having to wait days or weeks?
Absolutely. It's a really fun phenomenon. In fact, I remember a participant in the class that had a dream about the book that we were going to photo read. That was the cover-up book. It was a novel. They weren't going to be able to see the title of it at all. We're going to photo read it upside down and backwards. The night before, he said, "You know, Paul, I never actually dream." I said, "I understand, but just pay attention to your dreams." In the morning, he said, "Oh my goodness, I had a dream." And he described the entire book, a scene of it absolutely in specific detail. So when you think about that, well, how is it possible that a person could have a precognition, a precognitive representation? And certainly Genius Code talks a lot about that. What we have access to through that ongoing stream of information at just below the threshold of our conscious awareness are all the answers that we need. And very often, and this is a key, Pete, very often the answers to the questions we need to ask but haven't asked yet are trying to get to us. And so what we want to think about is, what is your intention? And then have a dialogue with your own inner mind about, how can I gain access to the answers I need to resolve this issue or to take the next step that I need to take? And the non-conscious mind is so infinitely resourceful, it's going to be able to give you what it is that you need. And pay attention, because very often it will come. Just like this question mentioned in a book that you're going to read in a couple of days. So pay close attention.
Sweet. Okay, so next one. I've taken photo reading several times and find I still don't trust myself with the information I'm getting. How can I deepen my belief and allow my mind to succeed at this? I aspire to be a photo reader, but something seems to be blocking my own progress.
Well, first of all, accept you are a photo reader. The moment that you took the course, as soon as you graduated from it, you're a photo reader. And what photo reading looks, sounds, and feels like for each individual may be slightly different. So rather than comparing yourself to others, notice what it is you are getting. When you photo read anything, pay attention to what's occurring within you. Historically, when you read something word for word, line by line, one page after another page, what happened is you retained very little of it. Many people who read just in an auditory way retain 11%. Well, 4 to 11% of the meaning of a book is in the actual words on a given page. So what if your mind could pick out those words and give those to you as a way of showing you that this is what the book is about? People get the misunderstanding that you should be able to repeat every single word that's in a book after you've used the photo reading whole mind process. Not necessary. Get to the level of comprehension that you need to accomplish what it is that you desire. So starting right now, accept the fact that you are a photo reader. As you do the process, don't worry about trusting the process or trusting us or trusting anyone else. Work on that trust within yourself that you can do what's necessary to accomplish a very important goal that's in front of you. And remember, it's not about more books, it's about living more life. And so the books are here to support you in achieving those greater goals that are more important for you. That's what you need to have faith in.
So Paul, here's a question that we actually kind of addressed in last month's session, but it's worth bringing up again because it keeps showing up. Can I simply just do the actual photo reading process without activating? Are there tips for doing just the process by itself? And when is that useful?
Well, the first time that we really started exploring this way back in the beginning of photo reading, Pete, one of the things that we would do is we would take a stack of books. I was in my master's degree at the time. I had to write a paper on a particular subject area. I went to a library. It was a long ways away. I got a hold of the books. I remember back then when you actually had to have physical books in 1985. So I got a stack of a dozen books and I photo read them all. Now, what happens when you photo read, you develop a sense of familiarity. Certainly by previewing, you get a sense of an awareness of what the books are. But when you photo read it, you start to develop a familiarity. You're getting the patterns about a subject area. So the difference between a novice and an expert is that an expert has a lot of exposure to all the patterns within this subject area, all the patterns, all the language, everything about that subject area. These are all patterns of information. And the expert has a lot of exposure. The novice, they look at one book, they don't really know how to fit that into the area of anything else that they might know about, especially about a subject that they're unfamiliar with. But what's happening is they're starting to build exposure. So the question is, what's the fastest way to give your brain exposure to information from books? Flip, 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 flip. And so out of 10 books, you'll probably find 2 that are really valid for you and your particular questions, the answers you're seeking about a particular subject. So yes, absolutely. Especially with students, I say, hey, go to the lending library and get all the advanced reading that your professors have said are important. Photo read all of them in the first 2 weeks of the semester. Well, it's the same thing with any of us. If you're interested in advancing yourself in any field in which you're now professionally active, photo read as much as you can. Don't worry about activating. When you find something that you think, whoa, this is it, this is the juicy stuff, now use the whole system and activate that book.
Yeah, I do that a lot too, where, we get sent so many books to read, people, authors or people who think that we might enjoy a particular book. Well, I don't have time to read every book. I don't have time to activate every book, but I have time to photo read every book. And when I get that sense when I'm photo reading a book, boy, there's something in here that I should pay attention to. Great, then I'll go in, I'll do some activation with it. But that's one of the times I often will just simply photo read a book without spending any activation time.
Well, then you got to ask yourself, if you don't have a reason for the activation of a book, then just go find books that you are interested in and don't worry about activating all of them. When my kids were little, they used to go in the library and take an entire shelf of books in the library, and they'd go through all of them and in a matter of a couple of weeks that we had them loaned out. And they would get exposure to this kind of information. They absolutely loved it. And they always did great in school. So think about how you would like to advance your life and get into it. PhotoRead a lot.
Wonderful. Paul, can you explain in detail the pathway through which large volumes of information gets channeled into the non-conscious?
In terms of the neurophysiology. So let me explain a couple of very important things. We've got an eyeball, and that eyeball has an optic nerve that goes into the brain. And there are several regions of the eyeball, and the various regions send information to different areas through different pathways. So, for example, the periphery of our visual field will take in information about movement, but not necessarily detail and color. And so when we're observing our world and information comes in at the side, it may be asking us to attend to that information. Most important is this little tiny window of hard focus that we have been trained to read with. It's called the fovea of the eye, and it's a very tightly packed bundle of nerves. And what that does is it creates hard focus. And our job as readers is to fuse the image of the left eye and the right eye into a single representation that's going into the brain. Right eye is sending information to the right and left hemisphere, left eye to the right and left hemisphere. And those crossovers going into the brain are sending information that are helping us to discern what's on the page in front of us. Unfortunately, the way that most of us learn to read is to take that grapheme, that little lexicon, that letter, and turn it into a phoneme, which is a sound. So we learn to sound it out. So we move only as fast as we can sound it out as we're reading left to right, one word at a time. So a lot is going on outside of that conscious, hard focus visual process. And research has shown that virtually everyone is born with perfect photographic memory, but only about 1% of adults retain it. It's not that we don't have the pathways going in. It's that we subordinate those pathways to what we call a dominance of the conscious visual processor. So back in the early 90s, the journal Brain showed a study that indicates we can have conscious visual perception without the primary visual cortex being activated in the brain. In other words, those conscious, linear, word-by-word pathways that most of us use to read. And I remember when Dr. Izzy Katzoff read that, he called us up from South Africa. He's a neurophysiologist, a professor at the University of Johannesburg. And he said, Paul, they finally found what you've been teaching us for a decade now. And this is a very important idea to keep in mind, that we're actually allowing ourselves to get exposed to vast amounts of information as we flip it, but we're not engaging the conscious mind in order to do that. We're engaging the pre-conscious processor and the non-conscious mind. Both are resources that we are neurologically equipped with at birth. Now, whether or not we will be able to one day do the brain studies that show that we're activating these pathways for non-conscious acquisition of information, hopefully, yes. We've got some brain scientists, brain surgeon, especially in Belgium, who's very interested in helping us get these studies done. So until we know more, what we're doing is we're the cognitive psychologists call it implicit learning, or the non-conscious acquisition of information. Neuroscientists say we're using pathways other than the primary visual cortex. And as a result of the protocol called the PhotoReading whole mind system, that protocol activates those pathways, those capabilities, those natural abilities that are within us. So you can do this. Anyone can do this.
Paul, one of the things I just absolutely love about photo reading is that you can do photo reading and it works whether or not you understand what you just said.
Yeah.
It's kind of like this phone here, okay, right? Okay, so it's an amazing phone, but I don't have to understand how it works in order to make a call or in order to look at my email with it.
You don't even need to know what the word GUI means, and yet that thing is covered with GUIs.
Yeah.
A GUI
So it's
is
nice
a
that
graphical, you know that a GUI is a graphical user interface.
Yeah,
Well,
GUI.
right. So you remember a book called The User Illusion by Tor Nørretranders? This was a Danish science writer who talked about this amazing ability of the human mind to learn non-consciously. And he said, a lot of us are on our computers are moving these little icons around and we think we're controlling the computer. In a way we are, but what's going on in the code behind that screen, that's the important stuff. So the question that was just asked is, tell me about the code behind the screen. I said, yeah, we can tell you all kinds of stuff about the code. You don't need it in order to photo read, which is your point.
That's right. That's right.
Thank
Okay, next
goodness.
question. What should a student do if after following the exact steps of the photo reading system every day for a week, if I'm still not getting that connection between the conscious and non-conscious while doing the activation step?
Well, part of the thing that I have to ask is, how do you know that you're not getting that connection? First of all, you have an unconscious mind. It's always with you. You're always communicating with it. When you photo read, you're using your non-conscious mind and your pre-conscious processor. You can't not do that. It's what your brain does. So we've got this limited conscious, rational brain that is processing information at 7 bits at a time. And we've got this spectacular eye-mind connection, which is taking in 10 million bits of information at a second. And so you got to ask yourself, well, how do those two work together most effectively? And so, Pete, with photo reading, we actually recommend 2 things to facilitate. Number 1 is a paraliminal called Genius Code. And the second is a paraliminal called Memory Supercharger. And both of those speak
Paul,
to it. Yeah.
It is Personal Genius, not Genius Code Paraliminal.
Oh, did I say Genius Code?
Yeah. So that just means you have to listen to the Memory Supercharger a little bit later today.
I've been talking so much about Genius Code lately, it got stuck in my head. But yeah, the idea of personal genius paraliminal. And what that does is it raises your self-esteem as a learner that says you can do this. And then the memory supercharger paraliminal is about that crossover communication between the conscious mind, which is this linear, sequential, word-for-word processor, and the non-conscious mind, your right hemisphere, which is connected to so much more resource. As the late Dr. Win Wenger, our colleague, talked about, the further resources of your mind.
Paul, the next question is, I understand that a book is essentially energy and that this energy is picked up by the preconscious processor, but how is this picked up from an ebook on the computer screen? Does it have something to do with the light carrying the information or what?
Huh, that's a good one. Why would the individual letters printed carry a different energy than the individual letters on an e-reader? I mean, essentially what we're talking about is the shape of a letter and the space around it having an impact on the brain. Do you remember, Pete, in the early days of computing, back when you and I were in high school, we had punch cards and we'd run this piece of cardboard, basically, or stiff paper with a bunch of little holes in it. And what would happen is the computer would read those as binary information on, off, or in the case of an e-reader or a letter of an alphabet, an on or off signal. Now, what's interesting to me, Pete, is if you ran your fingers over Braille, would you be able to understand what it said right now?
I wouldn't, no, not
Yeah.
consciously.
Not consciously, right. Yeah. And if you took a punch card and you ran your fingers over those holes, would you be able to make any sense of it? Probably not, but we've got the machinery that has the ability to do that. And once it's trained, it will do it for us. So if you think about a Braille reader, think that you may remember seeing that one of our photo reading instructors in another country had a blind woman who used Braille. And she was photo reading with Braille books. And she said she quadrupled her speed, and she got way more information at those speeds. And when she did her mind maps, what she did is she punched out Braille letters and put them on a piece of paper with tape in order to have her mind maps of what it was that she had activated. So our brains have the ability to do this, to make those translations. It's quite mysterious. It's quite wonderful. I attended the Nobel Prize lectures when they were hosted at Gustavus College. I don't know if you remember those Nobel conferences, but one of the presenters was talking about the convergence zones. And the thing we know most about in all of the mysteries of the brain is how the brain actually is able to represent letters that it sees in front of you. It's spectacular. And to explain it, you might need a Nobel Prize to do it, but it is what the human brain can do.
But also, Paul, remember what Chenny Lin said from Spring Forest Qigong after he learned photo reading from Lynette. He said that all the information that's contained in the book is contained in this energetic field. And photo reading is a way to bring it into us to be able to understand it without necessarily needing to go word for word or even to be able to understand the words or the letters that are on the page.
Well, and that story was particularly interesting because that photo reading instructor in the south of France ran into another Qigong master. And that Qigong master said, you know, ma'am, people aren't taking that information in through their eyes. They're taking it in through their lower dantian, through an energetic center. Now, Pete, you and I, how would we explain that? You know, and there's something called nada yoga, the yoga of sound, and they take it in through the body. All that information just comes right in. And who's to say that the organ called the human eyeball is the only vehicle for getting information from the world around us? It's not. We can use all of our senses. And if you think about an energy interaction, your energy and the energy of the book melding together in order to inform you, it may be that you're not even pulling the information from the book. It's more like looking at a mirror and recognizing what it is you've needed to notice, what it is you've needed to remember, but it's already stored within you. It starts to get kind of esoteric, but so do a lot of these energy traditions. It's kind of out there information.
Yeah, it is. And after Chun-Yi learned photo reading, he said now he finally understands why we wanted to work with him in the 1990s to create the Spring Forest Qigong personal learning course. He said, because it seemed photo reading and Qigong seemed so different from each other. But he says, now I see how they all really are the same thing.
Yeah. And he said that for him, photo reading was a total game changer. And that was the same thing with Masanori Kanda. If you remember, when he took the photo reading course, he instantly saw the potential of this for all Asian people. And so he's been working since that time, not only as a certified photo reading instructor, but helping to train instructors both in China and in Japan, and also now in Korea. And the idea is that if, he said, people can come together with shared information, we would truly have unity. And so his organization is for Asian unity. You think about what a massively transformative purpose something like photo reading can have in our lives. It can really be a game changer for us.
Paul, you mentioned Masanori, and a question here is, I've heard that photo reading, that Japanese photo reading students can smell and hear sounds while flipping through books.
Really? I love that. Well, I don't know why you wouldn't be able to. I mean, certainly anything that's represented can trigger a memory of any of those experiences as well, whether they're smelling it from the book or the energy of interacting with the book is just triggering the memory of it. I would say, yeah, we tend to use all our sensory systems, and Pete, also the multiple intelligences. You know, we have 8 intelligences that are identified, and photo reading actually uses all of them, not just the linguistic and not just the logical, but it activates all of them: the musical, the interpersonal, the intrapersonal, the naturalist, the spiritual intelligence, all of it.
So Paul, so when we're talking about, all the possibilities here with photo reading, we sent out that link to folks to watch the video from the BBC with Darren Brown. Can you talk about that?
Sure. You know, Darren uses the word photo reading in the book, and he's been a big fan of what it is that we do. Now, you have to understand that when somebody does something really spectacular like that, if you as a viewer see it happening, you have to ask, is that possible for me, or is that unique to them? And there is a woman that has done some really profound study on what's called mindset. And she wrote a book that looks at the difference between people who are able to grow their capacity to accomplish certain results and those who don't. And she described it as a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. And if you can see yourself as someone who can grow into that ability, fantastic. I remember a woman who was interviewed in Germany after taking the photo reading program from our German instructor. And she was called up by a television station saying, hey, we heard that you just graduated from the photo reading class. We'd like to see what it's all about. We want to have you photo read a book, and then we'll ask you questions about it on camera. Are you interested? She said, let me get back to you. So she thought about it, and she really wrestled with herself pretty much all night long. She said, I just took this class. I don't even know if I can photo read. I haven't used it very much. I don't know. I've never done anything like that. But how would I know? If I've never done anything like that, how would I know if I can't do it? So she called him up and she said, I'll do it. But here are the criteria. I want to have 45 minutes with a book. And I'm going to preview it, and photo read it in the night. I'm going to wake up in the morning, I'm going to activate it. And right after I activate it, then you can ask me the questions. And they agreed, and they monitored, and they made sure that she didn't have access to the book, etc. So they watched her, they filmed her the next morning, put her in front of the camera, and they asked her the questions, and she got 5 for 5 correct. Now I showed the film of that show to a group of 190 executives, high-powered executives from various industries all over Germany, brought together in Munich for the lecture that I gave. And one person put up his hand and said, if you had shown me that video prior to my enrolling in today's session, I wouldn't have come. And the woman who was there talking about her experience, Christina, she said, why is that? He said, because I wouldn't have believed that it was possible for me. And she looked at him and said, I didn't know if it was possible for me. But how would I know if I didn't try? And he said, well, I wouldn't even have come. And he sat down in a huff. So Pete, you and I know that people who come to learning strategies, people who have an interest in learning photo reading, are sincere about saying, hey, I want to really have the limits that I've placed on myself around reading. I want those removed. I want to be able to have these kinds of experiences. Well, that's the key, is you have to put yourself into experiences that will challenge you that way. So you might remember Lowell Sandvig. He was a teacher in northern Minnesota, worked for the Minnesota schools, and traveled around talking a lot about accelerated learning and how he could use, how children could accelerate their ability, use more of their genius abilities within. And he would often talk about photo reading. People would say, oh, photo reading, that's not possible. And he'd pull out a dictionary, a big fat dictionary, hand it to him, just like Darren Brown did. And he'd say, ask me a question, ask me any word in that dictionary, I'll tell you where it's placed on the page, and I'll tell the answer. I'll define the word for you. And so people would rifle through it. He wouldn't look, right? They'd rifle through it. They'd find a word. They tell him the word, and he'd say, it's on the right-hand page. It's on the left-hand column of the 2 columns. It's about 6 words down, and the definition is blah, blah, blah. And he just did it all the time. I said to him, Lowell, how come that's your demonstration? Why do you do it? He said, it's just a game I play. I love doing it. I know it always works. I don't even know why it works, but I photo read the dictionary and I ask my mind where the word's placed, and instantly it comes to me. And if you watch Darren Brown's eyeballs, when he's getting asked the questions, you'll see him going to visual remembered and visual construct. And I remember when he was asked a story about the story he was reading, one of the books, he would go down into the kinesthetic. So we're talking about accessing more of the full potential of the human brain. But you've got to be able to put yourself into those sorts of circumstances in order to demonstrate. And Pete, you could speak to that as well. You did in the last session, but what's it like? Somebody asks you a question and you look around and you've got no idea what the answer is. Do you go, oh, this isn't working? Or do you say, ask me another question and see if we can get the flow of information going, right?
Yeah, that is about asking me another question and just see what comes in and just start to describe what is in my mind. Usually it's visual, but sometimes I hear things and sometimes there are words that will show up, and it's just a matter of having come in and trusting it. Well, how do you trust it? Well, you just keep doing it. Just, pretend that you're trusting it, and then trust happens.
Well, you pretend you're trusted, that will at least get you to do it. And that's what's going to make it happen, is that you're doing it. You become familiar with the process, you rely on it, and you recognize it works for you. So for me to use it during a master's degree, for me to use it in a doctorate degree, when people were dropping like flies because they couldn't keep up with the reading, it was a hop, skip, and a jump for me. And it was the most pleasurable part. The thing that stops most doctoral students is the literature review. For me, I loved every second of it. And, this is the difference that makes a difference, is the growth mindset. If you try to answer a question and you don't have any information, you go, this isn't working. I can't do this. What's wrong with me? No, you've already discounted yourself. Don't discount yourself. If it doesn't work once or twice or for a week, keep playing. And you're going to discover, you're going to have a breakthrough situation where you'll recognize, okay, I get it. I can rely on this to get me where I need to go.
So Paul, in the retreat that's coming up in November, are we going to be doing photo reading challenges?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we'll have photo reading challenges. Essentially, what we want to do is every single day be photo reading quite a few books. And each time I'll lead one photo reading session, I'll make sure that another element of the photo reading whole mind system, one of the component steps, is explain any questions that anybody has, so everybody feels that they're very comfortable with it. But then we're going to go through the photo reading system rapidly, many times during those 5 days that we're together. And what's going to happen is you're going to get the habit. You're going to rely on your mind knowing that you know what to do. So it's time to go through a book. Boom, you're in it, you're on it, you're doing it. And we'll also bring in people who have had significant breakthroughs in their photo reading lives to talk about how those breakthroughs occurred for them. And it's one thing to watch someone else do it and say, here, I want to challenge you. I want to see if you can do that. But it's much more important that you yourself take the challenge and recognize that you can do it, because it doesn't matter if you're in a room with 1 million people and 999,999 of them can do it and you can't. What good is it to you, right? So you have to find your way into this. You have to find your personal connection. And by giving yourself a number of days, time on task, repeatedly doing the process, refining the skills, you're going to feel that this is a tool that you can rely on for all the rest of your life.
Excellent. Now, we've been talking about the photo reading retreat since the first of the year when we scheduled. We haven't done an in-person one in a long time. This November one, it's not going to be in person. It's going to be on Zoom. Mm-hmm. And if you don't know about it yet, you'll be getting an email next week on it. It's going to be November 10th through the 14th, and we're from 10 a.m. until 3:30 p.m. on those days. The tuition is 10 payments of $150. And all we ask is that you do a $150 deposit now, and that will save you a spot with it. And it's refundable up until, last minute, so there's no problem with that. And if you'd like to make your deposit now, you can do it real easily. Just go to this website that I'm going to put in chat right now. And it is learningstrategies.com/bewithpaul. learningstrategies.com/bewithpaul. And then we'll send you all the information so you can start getting ready for this event that Paul's going to be doing. Now, if you've already been through the retreat, if you took one of the past in-person retreats, and that would be 2004, 2007, or 2012, a long time ago, you're going to save $300 on your tuition. And then we also have a special or bonus as a reward for you showing up today and being part of what we're doing here and being curious about photo reading and actually working photo reading. Well, if you enroll, if you haven't already, if you've enrolled in the next 24 hours by 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, you'll get $50 off your final payment. We'll just do that automatically. Just enroll before 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon Central Time, and we'll take care of that for you. If you previously enrolled at the full tuition, send us an email to customer service at learningstrategies.com, and we'll take care of it. We'll knock that extra $50 off the end for you. Because again, we want to support you in playing with photo reading and taking it to the next step to get rid of those upper limits that you might have. The web address is learningstrategies.com/bewithpaul. That's going to automatically put the deposit into your shopping cart. Easy peasy. Then all you have to do is check out, and then you'll be getting information from us. And Katie will be in touch with you too to make sure that you get everything that you need in order to go through to be ready for the retreat. Paul, anything else about the retreat that you want to talk about?
Yeah, you know that there is a reason why we photo read a book. And a lot of people think, well, my purpose for photo reading this book is to know everything that's in the book. Right. Well, if you knew everything that's in the book, what then would you be able to do or be or have that's even more important than the book? And so we look at the goal behind the goal. And there is a purpose for our reading, and that's to advance our lives, to be able to live a richer, more abundant, satisfying, joy-filled, grateful life. And we're going to set goals in 4 areas for the retreat. So there's going to be a success goal, and you define, what does that mean? Is it your career? Is it finances? I don't know what success is for you. You define it, and you'll gather books that will assist you in having a breakthrough in the direction of that goal. And that will all be explained in the information that we send to you. We'll also do that in the area of health. What does health mean for you? It might be emotional health, it might be physical health, it might be losing weight, it might be getting an exercise routine that really works for you. It might be mental health. Whatever health is for you, you select the books. We're going to go through those books so that you can have a breakthrough. One of the most powerful, hidden, secret techniques of the photo reading whole minds process is called direct learning. That's where the body actually starts to activate the material, even though consciously you didn't even know that it was happening. That's an exciting part of what pre-conscious processing and implicit learning, non-conscious acquisition of information can do. We're also going to pick a goal in the area of relationships. Now that might be mediation, negotiation, delegation, better communication skills, improve relationship with a significant other, improve relationship with a teenage child, whatever it might be. You select the goal in relationship category and select the books, and you will be activating those books. And then also in the area of growth, that might be personal growth, professional growth, spiritual growth. So some people will take 5 books on meditation, mindfulness, contemplation exercises, yoga and Zen and Taoist and Christian meditation, all kinds of different ways in which they could recognize and practice meditation. And the brain naturally synthesizes a way forward for you. So you pick the goal area. We've set the 4 goal areas. You pick the goal and select the books, and you're going to have a breakthrough in each of these 4 areas that we're going to be photo reading in. Now, obviously, we've got 5 days, so why not a 5th goal? Because the rest of that time is going to be to really up-level your skills, take the challenges necessary, and realize how you can make photo reading your lifelong partner to the realization of your genius potential.
Paul, you mentioned direct learning. Can you give some examples of what other people have used direct learning for?
Yeah, there have been so many different ones. I'll take some of the obvious ones. You remember Leonard, who worked for us. He was a chess master and certified, point level to be certified as a master chess player in the state of Minnesota. And he began photo reading and direct learning in books on chess strategy. And the progress he made, his ability to up-level his gameplay was nothing short of astounding and well documented, because he can show what his progress was before and after photo reading. Other people have used it for things like their golf.
First of all, Paul, wasn't he the Minnesota state champion, chess champion?
Yes, he was.
So that was the proof of the pudding there.
That was the tasting of that pudding, that's for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so the idea is that people who have used it for sports like golf or tennis, racquetball, or today pickleball, you know, if there's so much information that it can help us up level our game, but who has time to read them, let alone practice all the skills that are within it? But you see, your brain is a natural accelerated learner. So you say to your brain, hey, brain, now that you've gotten all that information, put it in, embody it, and up level my play. And then you simply imagine yourself a month from now with this up leveled capacity and skill set to play the game that you're on. Perfect real world test. And what we've seen is people who have been paired or matched with others, suddenly they take this leap in performance, and performance leap is what you and I are all about. How can we step past the limitations that for whatever reason have been imposed on us, that we keep bumping our head against as that glass ceiling? How can we break through that glass, and how can we get to a higher level of performance? At a conscious level, it's very linear and very plodding, but when you engage your non-conscious mind, there is breakthrough potential every single day of our lives. So let's get on it.
Well, I remember when we did a photo reading class in Winter Park, Colorado, Patricia Danielson was the instructor, and Randy Myers, who put on classes all over the country for us, joined us. And then we spent the week skiing. And I remember the first day that we went, it wasn't the first day, it was like the next day after we were skiing, I did so much better. And Patricia and Randy said, did you sneak in a ski lesson somehow? No, the night before I did direct learning with ski books, and it immediately showed up into my skiing that next day. And then the other thing that you might want to do with that is bring in the new behavior generator paraliminal and use that in conjunction with your direct learning. Because if you can then, if you know somebody who has already excelled at what you want to do, whether it's somebody in person or someone you've seen at TV, you bring that with the new behavior generator into direct learning, and it's unbeatable.
Yeah, another thing that we do is the over-the-wall technique from Genius Code, where all the authors of all the books that you PhotoRead or PhotoRead are over the other side of the wall. You leap in and you get an instruction opportunity with them. You embody that. And that's really it, is how do we embody new skills, and how can we do it rapidly? This is the best way to do it.
So Paul, someone just asked if they can't attend the retreat on those days, is there an option? Well, the option is enroll in the retreat. You're going to get all the videos in your online digital library. And if you can't do it live with us, start the next week, start the week after, and just have your own retreat with photo reading. And then as you have questions, you won't have Paul live in front of you, which you do if you take the retreat live. But we have photo reading coaches at Learning Strategies. Just give us a call and we'll help you through any of the challenges that you have with it. So one way or another, do the photo reading retreat in person if you can. If not, use the recordings. So Paul, a question that came in is whether or not palm reading will be part of the retreat, which brings up the question, what is palm reading?
Well, there was this remarkable skill that was uncovered 3,000 years ago, this ability to scan information with your hands. And in Mexico City, there is a person teaching little children, preschool children, to run their hands down pages, and a Qigong master showing that kids would hold their hands over books and be able to understand what the book is about. So at our first photo reading retreat, I wanted to see if we could do that. So I had a group of 100 people. I said, let's go for it. And it was absolutely stunning. I wrote about it in my third book called Drop into Genius. And that ability to actually sense or pick up information other than just through our eyes is this idea we can send the energy into a book pull it back to us and then represent that information in the mind. The technique is actually fairly simple, and it's one of the games that we'll play repeatedly within the retreat setting. It's what many people do when they're getting ready to decide which novel they're going to read. They'll look at the book, they'll hold it in their hand, they'll get a feeling for it, flip the pages and say, yep, that's one. Nope, not that one. Nope, not that one. So the idea is that we really do have an amazing number of intelligence sensory systems that will allow us to get the information we need to take the next step that we desire.
Sweet. Paul, if somebody wants to teach photo reading to their kids, let's say they have kids that are pretty good readers now, they're young and they're curious about photo reading, what's the best way to bring them into photo reading?
Well, when I used to go to the what was called the Wings program, it was the gifted, talented program at my kids' school. These are kids in elementary school. I would show them what you and I published, Pete, as the 10 minutes to faster reading. It's sort of like photo reading light, where you learn to put a tangerine on the top of your head, you learn to scan the pages, and you also learn to preview. And what happens is kids start recognizing that there are other ways to go through a book. Now, getting kids to turn the books upside down and backwards and flipping pages is another really quick way, because they know, well, consciously, and it's not important that I'm getting this, but I know that my mind is getting it, so it's going to serve me somehow. I don't know how. And as a result of exposing kids to those kinds of possibilities, they begin to recognize choices that the school systems would never offer them. So one of the things I used to do with my babies when we would, and what I'm doing with my grandkids, if there's a book that they know frontwards, then what I'll do is I'll read it backwards. And when I read it backwards, they're learning that it's fun to hear it, the sentence structure backwards. And they also know the story, and the story is getting represented inside of them. So whether the book's right side up, whether it's upside down, whether it's front to back, or whether it's back to front, anyway, their little brains can process it perfectly well. Once they recognize they have those kinds of choices, they're going to start exploring and discover what else their brain can do. So that's a good way to start. And if you go through the photo reading course, then you can take out some of the key ideas. You could actually set aside the 17 hours it takes to listen to the program and go through it with them. Set aside a set of evenings or weekend time and go through the entire photo reading whole mind system with them, and just be there as a support. I have to tell you, Pete, all the courses that I've seen where an adult brings a child, and we've had 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14-year-olds, come into the program, it's usually the kids who are the support of the parents getting the breakthrough that they're looking for. I remember one dentist and his daughter an 11-year-old daughter putting her hand on his shoulder. Dad, you can do this. You're going to get this. Giving the
Yeah, kids always do better than their parents. And, the program was originally licensed by the state of Minnesota as we were a private school, and it was for 18 years and above, and we couldn't have people less than 18. So we had to make exceptions and all of that. But the truth of the matter is, when you're younger, you don't need the photo reading seminar, because it's so easy to learn, because the photo reading process is natural. The problem that we have as adults is that we got that little voice in the back of our head who's jammering at us saying that this isn't possible, or this can't possibly work this way. And so you have to deal with all those beliefs that you have, and the kids don't have that. They're not programmed with that.
Yeah, I remember a 15-year-old from a school in Wayzata. A bunch of them came. There were 4 kids that came, and one of these kids was never really done very well in school, but he got it. It was so amazing. Any book, he would just flip through it. You could hand him, he could hand you the book, and you could ask him any question, he could tell you the answer to it. He went home after the second night and told his mom excitedly, and you know what she said to him? Oh, that's not true. You're just teasing me. You're just making this up. There's some trick here. She didn't even acknowledge the brilliant skills that were within her own child. And you see, that's where upper limits oftentimes come from. It's from our social setting, our friends, our teachers, our family systems that say, oh, you're never going to be able to do that. Oh, that's not possible. You couldn't possibly. I know who you are. And breaking those upper limits are about doing something different and discovering the feedback that you can do it.
Yeah. So Paul, let's do 2 more questions. We only got a couple minutes till the end of the hour. So if we can do the questions rather rapidly.
Hint, hint.
Yeah. Does photo reading help sense if a book is plagiarized or not?
Yes. Next question.
Okay, sounds good.
Well, what I want to say about that is very often, we've had authors that would photo read books and then start writing. And of course, that was a concern that they had, is, am I going to start unconsciously plagiarizing book materials that are in that? And all you really have to do is ask your mind to make sure that this is original, and it will do that for you. And the other thing is, editors are doing this all the time. A lot of editors are photo readers because they can spot errors very quickly. So if you ask your mind, is this book or any part of it a plagiarism for something else, and you photo read it, your mind will let you know. It's like an intuitive hit that you'll get that will say yes or no.
I remember one time, Paul, I was photo reading a book and I was doing the activation on it, and it just didn't feel right. It was like the information was not correct. And so I stopped and I went back to the table, or to the copyright page. Sure enough, the book was like 20 years old. And I hadn't caught that during the preview or post view, but it came up during the activation that there's something wrong here. So when you get those hits, act on them, explore them.
Yep.
The final question that we'll do is, I've become so forgetful now that I'm postmenopausal, and I'm afraid that photo reading will no longer work for me. Have others experienced this? Do you have any comments on this?
Yeah, I'm postmenopausal. I haven't had any trouble with that. Actually, yeah, we've obviously have lots and lots of folks, and it's easy to put a pin on something and say, well, that's the reason why. And what our colleague Vera Birkenbiel would say in the Memory Optimizer program is, there may be a number of reasons why your memory is not perfect or as good as it was before, but no memory is perfect. It's all fallible. What you need to do is you need to strengthen the construction so that the reconstruction of the information comes back to you. And so there are ways to use the photo reading whole mind system to make sure that you're getting information more accurately, more true. You're able to then go back and get that information, pull that information back with more effective memory of the material. And sometimes, certainly for this current phase of your life, it might mean that you up your intentionality around it. As a scholar, I had to make sure that I quoted my source correctly. So there are things that I implemented that prior to my doctoral work, I just didn't worry about a whole lot. But when I started doing my doctorate, I knew I had to get these things right. So there are some hints, some specific strategies that you can use to help make a difference with that.
Great, thanks, Paul.
Yeah.
So last comment before we close off, let's go back to the retreat for a second. So it's coming up November 10th. So it's November 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th. And it's every day till 3:30 in the afternoon. What time does it start, Paul? Do you remember? At
10 a.m.
Yeah, 10 o'clock Central Time to 3:30 Central Time. So it's not all day. What we would recommend is that you do take the time off from work, so you don't have all the other stuff bracketing your day. Let this be your time for photo reading. Let it be your retreat into the powers of your other than conscious mind and what you can do with photo reading. And then that way it gives you an opportunity to play with things through the evening too. If you'd like to make a deposit, you can do so right now. Just go to learningstrategies.com/bewithpaul, learningstrategies.com/bewithpaul. That's Paul Scheele there. And one of the reasons that we have that as the URL to enroll is because that's what's going to happen. You're going to be with Paul. You've experienced what he's like in this last hour, and you know he doesn't duck anything. And you know he has this vast warehouse of experience, of knowledge, from everything from the technical side to the real practical stuff. What do you have to do in order to get this to work? So you're going to have Paul for those 5 days. So take advantage of it. It's the first time we've done this since 2012. Paul, I can't believe it's taken so long for it. So it is really a great opportunity for everybody. So Paul, thanks for your time. Any final words on the retreat or about photo reading?
I'm looking forward to seeing you there. Come join me. It'll be an absolute blast. The time is going to fly. We'll have a lot of fun and you'll have a lot of breakthroughs.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you all for being here.
See you, Pete.
Bye-bye.